when nobody's looking. The fact that no one will know makes us comfortable and allows us to entertain all sorts of absurd thoughts and activities. But what happens if someone spends years or even decades without engaging meaningfully with another person? What sort of dark recesses and warped beliefs does their mind access if they feel nobody cares either way? That's what we'll discover by learning the grim story of Randy Stair, a man whose isolation led to a bizarre obsession with Danny Phantom fan characters and ultimately a massacre. This is the Danny Phantom Killer.
24-year-old Randy Stair.
YouTube videos of Stair preparing for the attack.
It's fate. It's destiny.
It's me, Randy Stair.
What happened? What the fuck happened, man? Swear to God.
Every time I get to look at the clock, I always see her.
I got it! 2 Mossberg 500 shotguns!
If you're watching this, I'm dead. I'm sorry.
Very little is known about Randy's personal life other than what he said about it himself. In a way, this is revealing. Until the very last moments of his life, no one cared about his story enough to document it, and even then, people were only sharing what he chose to publish online. Not that he's deserving of attention given his heinous crime, but it's worth noting that negligence is a motif that punctuates his entire life. One of the documents he eventually posted online focused on providing information on his early years. In his own words, born in 1992, Randy was his parents' first child, and 2 years later, they had his brother. He decidedly doesn't go into detail about his parents, neglecting to even name them, which, as we'll glean later, is a subtle sign of his disdain for them, struggling to acknowledge their relevance in his coming to be. His mom had a background in nursing and had been working as a biomedical equipment technician for a general hospital for about half a decade by the time Randy was born. In a very strange coincidence, her name is the exact same name as the mother of Joe Stair, who was not only a student at Columbine, but the founder of the Trenchcoat Mafia, a group which the perpetrators of that particular crime are frequently, and wrongly, thought to be members of. His father, on the other hand, was a store manager for the Wise chain of supermarkets, a fact we'll come back to later due to its relation to the crime Randy eventually committed. Randy recalls that for as long as he can remember, he's always been very shy, crying profusely due to feeling lost and helpless when his parents left him at school, and either looking down or straight up at the ceiling whilst walking into classrooms to avoid making eye contact with anybody. He specifies that this wasn't because he hated people, but because he disliked being noticed. He conjures a memory of a play his class put on in preschool, and during it, he stood in the back of the stage with his back facing the audience, zoning out whilst trying to take his mind off the situation he was in. As time progressed, he discovered himself completely unable to relate to any of his classmates, confused about how they could interact so easily, as if they already knew each other for years. Meanwhile, he sat by himself near the teacher, crying whenever he had a group project. Eventually, he did make some friends, but never got to hang out with them outside of school, being too scared to call them. As a matter of fact, he was hesitant to even call his grandmother, fearing his grandfather would pick up instead. The first sad memory he can remember is when one of the very few friends he had at the time, Michael, had to move away in first grade. He explains that he didn't even know him very well, but it's as if the feelings of being lost and abandoned he experienced when his parents first put him in school resurfaced. Soon he met another friend, one he credits with making him the person he eventually became. His name was Matthew, and for the first time, Randy felt he shared interests with someone else. Matthew was into football and recording with video cameras, both of which were hobbies of Randy's during elementary school. The two began recording homemade movies and parodies of films they'd watched. Footage from this period, when Randy and Matt were 10 to 12 years old, has been archived and published by Randy.
It is a blizzard out here. It is so cold that you can get so hyper and go like, this is a great day for snow. Most likely there's not going to be...
To see Randy just being an innocent kid, having fun in his backyard, is probably one of the darkest facets of this entire story, knowing who this kid would become. For most of his time at school, Matt was Randy's only significant friend, even after he stopped participating in the home videos Randy was becoming increasingly obsessed with. However, their friendship severely slowed down and eventually ended in 9th grade when Matt got a girlfriend, severely limiting their time together. Though Randy specifies that he wasn't romantically in love with Matt, he became angry that the girl was more important to Matt than he was, and once again, he felt abandoned. According to Randy, he had an easier time making friends with his brother's classmates, who were all 2 years younger than him, than his own peers. The only other friend mentioned by Randy in his document is James, whom he met right as his friendship with Matt was dissipating. James was also interested in filmmaking and was responsible for introducing Randy to YouTube and motivating him to make his own content. Ever since he was very little, Randy became acutely aware of how his friends watched cartoons and how cartoons were culturally ingrained in everyone's minds. As he grew up and began trying to idealize what he wished to be. A frequent thought he had was that he wished to be a cartoon character in the way that they were admired and watched by many. Maybe, just maybe, posting to YouTube would give him the kind of attention he was after, so he began posting to the platform. In June of 2008, when he was 16 years old, he created the YouTube account called Pioneers Productions. Randy had actually already been recording videos for 2 years prior under the name of Point2122, but they weren't really formatted in any way. Over the course of 2 years, he transitioned from plainly recording life events like the flood at his grandma's place or him and his friends playing dodgeball to mimicking the kind of content that was successful on YouTube at the time. In one of the earliest Pioneers Productions videos called Randy on Christmas, Randy can be seen wearing a Fred t-shirt. The very first YouTube channel to get 1 million subs was actually Fred, whose videos consisted of a middle schooler doing very rudimentary sketches with his voice pitched up. Its success is partly due to it being the first channel to capitalize on the kids browsing YouTube at the time, one of which happened to be Randy. Being enamored with the format, his earliest stuff is structured very similarly. Another admitted influence and inspiration during this time was Angry Video Game Nerd, which was evident given the introduction of extensive curse words in the videos. The videos from this era are pretty uneventful in and of themselves. Randy was just oscillating between conventional skits and mimicking the popular YouTubers he liked. While his online presence was pretty run-of-the-mill for a kid his age, his internal life was changing radically. As he himself put it, "I've been attracted to girls since I was in late 9th or the very start of 10th grade, around 2009. I've never once been into guys, so I'm thankfully not bisexual. That would suck being caught in the middle. 10th grade was when I really grew fond of wearing female clothes. Of course, being in a house with only one brother and a father, I had to start wearing my mom's clothes. It felt so wrong, but I became obsessed with wearing a bra, especially after the Ember phase started in 2010, which obviously was never a phase. Quite often, when I had the house to myself, I'd either A, film a YouTube video, or B, cross-dress. I must have been a master at putting things back exactly how they were, because my mom never once said anything. I just became obsessed with fantasizing about girls in 10th and 11th grade that the hormones were impossible to ignore. I jerked off in class a total of 4 to 6 times. It wasn't easy, but I would keep my hand in my pocket and go to town slowly for sometimes as long as 25 to 40 minutes until, lo and behold, there was success. I remember I did it in my 11th grade history class and my first period ecology class. I wouldn't recommend that, but when you're horny, you're horny. It was rare, but I even tried on my brother's girlfriend's jean shorts once while on vacation in June 2010. Anyone who's anyone can say, "Oh, Andrew's a fucking pedophile." It's called discovering yourself. It's not a crime. Do I go around stealing girls' clothes to wear? No, I don't. I don't tie them up in my basement either. But words cannot even remotely describe my love for girls. Yet, here I am in a filthy man's body, seen as a dude. I'm one of you, not a male. Every time I'm in a supermarket or in a retail store, I can't take my eyes off the slim teenage girls. I see them and think, why wasn't I born that way? And I break down on the inside. I wanted it, I never got it. I prayed for it, I never got it. I dreamed to have it, but I woke up repeatedly. I was destined to exist in a female's body. And the thing is, I don't want to be with girls. I want to be them. I'll gladly live and die a virgin. I respect girls too much to just use them for sex. People like that disgust me. The thought of screwing a girl disgusts me. Sex is disgusting. I am forever destined to live in isolation until I die. We'll come back to the puzzling mention of Ember later. The gender dysphoria and episodes of hypersexual behavior were paired with feelings of dread, as whatever positive experiences he still had at school began disintegrating as middle school ended and high school began. By high school, I just stopped trying to make friends. The whole grade knew me, but I was just there. I'd get picked on now and then, like hiding my backpack, my books, stealing my pencils, stealing my book covers, minor stuff. Never got into fights, but I ended up being in front of 2 of them in middle school. Obviously, my YouTube videos gained more respect from my class in 11th or 12th grade, but I was still just there. I've hated people my entire life. I didn't just wake up one day and start hating people. Middle school was when I really started to heat up and envision hurting the people in my class, such as Eric. In 6th to 8th grade, the kid was twice my size. He looked like a 9th or 10th grader. He was the class bully. He'd steal things from my lunch and then give it back because I didn't show any resistance. "This kid doesn't even care, haha," he joked. Since I was never a threat to him, he left me alone most of the time. Fortunately, no one ever physically assaulted me in school. Only time that I ever came close to a physical fight was this black kid, Jordan. Kept making sexual verbal gestures in my computer class, touching my workspace, keyboard, mouse, etc., and eventually caused me to fall out of my chair and onto the hard tiled floor. I couldn't even speak, I was so enraged. raged. That was in 2009. I was just too much of a wimp to speak my mind and stand up for myself between 9th and 11th grade. There was a lot on my mind in high school, and bullies were at the bottom of the list. You always have weak, stupid shit like that happening every day, but it added to the rage. High school, more than anything, was full of nothing but sex jokes and innuendo to get under your skin. If I had $1 for all the times I was put on the spot to be made uncomfortable by someone with sex jokes, I'd be rich. I hated high school, yet I miss it a lot. I don't miss the tests, but I miss the bubble we all used to live under. In one of the videos he published later, he elaborated on this topic.
I still got through, middle school and elementary school and all that, but once I got into high school, it just became endurance. That's what it felt like to me. I just did not want to get up and go to that school every day. I wasn't living. I feel like I never, lived. And I didn't want to either. That was the other thing. I thought about suicide in high school. That's when it really started entering my mind, a lot. And I just, started to grow, attached to, darker stuff. The thing that really started to push it was, when I started doing bad on all my tests and got bad grades and had to get tutored and started to prepare for college and having no idea what I wanted to do. And it was in 2010 when I really legit started to think about doing it, because I didn't want to go to college. I didn't want to get a job. I didn't want to live on anymore.
Despite the internal struggle Randy was suffering from during this time, his online presence continued. As I mentioned, he did begin to curse a lot during videos, but given the popularity of channels like Smosh, Tourette's Guy, and the aforementioned AVGN, during this time it was extremely commonplace. As far as Randy's viewers and friends were concerned, nothing had really changed. In March 2009, his channel was actually commented on by Fred himself. If his passion for producing video content wasn't enough, being recognized by one of the people he idolized at the time, even if just in a meager YouTube comment, definitely gave him the validation he needed to dedicate himself to becoming a full-time content creator. His online presence immediately spread out to other websites, and while we don't have any remains of his activity on sites like MySpace and Justin TV, which is what Twitch used to be called, we do have an archived version of his Twitter from around this time. On it, he exclusively talks about making his videos and following the Dallas Cowboys, one of his longest obsessions, as seen in many videos he recorded in his basement, where the walls are covered in Cowboys memorabilia.
Favorite football team?
The Cowboys.
This clip is from an interview he gave to another small channel in the latter half of 2009. Around the same time, Randy was a part of another channel called Fat Ass, an obviously jackass-inspired stunt and challenge channel. This channel seems to have been preserved in its entirety and is still up on YouTube as of writing this video. 2010 started out with Randy emulating another of his early YouTube influences, Make Me Bad 35, particularly his Mr. Wooden Alligator video, which Randy reproduced almost verbatim, but with a toy horse head on a stick, which he called Mr. Horsehead. After a few attempts at engaging with Make Me Bad 35 by making compilations and edits of his videos, he eventually got his attention. The two then made a collaboration video called Mr. Horsehead Meets Mr. Wooden Alligator, which was edited and posted by Randy.
Well, it isn't my problem that you lost your precious toy. Oh God, I see him! He's on my face! Ah!
Due to how big Make Me Bad 35 was on YouTube at the time, despite the abysmal quality of the video itself, within 3 months, the video had over 50,000 views. While not really huge, it wasn't insignificant by any means, especially for a YouTube channel as small as Randy's. As of November that year, he was on his way to 7,000 subs. Despite having taken a step toward his ultimate goal of becoming a YouTuber, the many issues present in his personal life continued to flare up. It's at this point that Randy becomes infatuated with Ember McLean. Ember is an antagonist from Danny Phantom, who, after tragically passing away in a fire, comes back as a ghost rock star that uses music to hypnotize people. She's pretty obscure, only appearing in 10 out of the 54 episodes of the show, but regardless, from the very moment Randy saw her as a little kid watching the cartoon, he claims he felt a spiritual connection with her that he couldn't quite explain. Over the years, it slowly faded into the back of his mind as he got carried away with other things, such as his passion for video making. However, it's around 2010 when he's going through a period of low spirits that she violently resurfaces, bringing with her a whole set of interests and passions, albeit things that were not very good for Randy. The movies he listed as his favorites on his YouTube channel are almost exclusively horror movies, and his music taste also fits the bill for an angsty teenager developing an interest in edgy media. However, the truth was much more disturbing.
This is when the whole Ember thing started, which you may or may not know what I'm talking about yet. But if you watch my cartoons, I've told you about her before. Like, if you look on the poster behind me, those were inspired by Ember McLean, which is a ghost from a TV show called Danny Phantom. This woman always connected with me. Ever since I first saw her, something changed. And it wasn't like I grew up or anything like that. Like, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm attracted to girls and all this. No, it just, something changed. It was like a spark. and it just connected with me. It made me feel warm inside, and it felt very familiar, which was strange. It was like I'd seen her before, and at the time I was like 13. I just grew attached to her, unlike anything I ever have in my life. It was like my first crush, and it's a cartoon, you know? It's kind of crazy to think of it that way, but that's the truth. And whenever I like started feeling down and depressed, I thought of this character. Like in later high school is when she started to come back into my life. Like, you know, I watched Danny Phantom in middle school, late middle school, early high school, but then I kind of drifted away from it. And once 12th grade rolled around is when I started to get, you know, depressed and venture off into this darker area. And this girl was just there all the time when I got into that darker place. And the character's backstory was she died in a house fire, and she made this song called Remember. It's a song that basically sums up her death, and I couldn't stop playing it. It like hypnotized me. It changed me.
After his interest in Ember resurfaced during the 12th grade, it went away almost completely as he graduated high school in 2011. As he mentioned in his diary, despite how much he was suffering during it, he ended up missing high school a lot. Perhaps the only reason his suffering was so noticeable while he was there was the fact that being at school contrasted his negative internal state with other people who weren't going through the same issues he was. At home, there was simply no standard to judge, but he was still dealing with the very same problems, just without showing symptoms. Randy describes graduation as a very positive experience, as it's almost as if missing high school gave him something real to yearn for, consequently sapping the hold his obsession with Ember had over him.
Today is graduation day. It's just, I can't believe how fast these past 13 years went. It's like, oh my god, it's over.
Randy eventually referred to this period in 2010, during which his Ember mania was at an all-time high, as the darkest days of his life, and the beginning of freshman year in college in 2011 as the best year of his life overall. Oddly, it's almost like he acknowledges that his fascination with Ember isn't good for him, and it's just a result of uncontrolled negative emotions. He all but says he'd rather live the normal life he got to briefly experience in 2011 before ultimately rationalizing his fixation on Ember as something inevitable that he simply has no chance of stopping. On YouTube, he attempted a few times to recapture the spark from Mr. Horsehead videos, but to no avail. It was clear that the only reason the first video got traction was because of Make Me Bad's appearance in it, so much so that another video on Randy's channel, in which he's apparently interviewing him, was his second most viewed video at 14,000 views. Unfortunately though, I wasn't able to find an archived version of that video. There's not a lot of archived activity dated to 2011, but we do have a video he made in June of that year to celebrate the 3-year anniversary of his channel, wherein he tells his audience about his journey to having 8,000 subscribers. Apparently, his usual sketch content had actually given way to regular vlogging, and we know this not because of an archived snapshot of his channel from this time period, but because Ray William Johnson, of all people, said so. After reacting to a video of a guy being run over by 2 cars, he specifies that this took place in the driveway of Randy's grandpa.
A couple of interesting things about this. One, the kid who originally posted this actually vlogs regularly on YouTube, which usually isn't the case for people who post these videos. And good for him, you know? Someone gets hurt in his grandpa's yard and he's like, F it, I'm gonna post this shit on YouTube right next to my blogs.
It's very disturbing to think about how many well-known internet personalities unwittingly became a part of the digital footprint of someone like Randy Stair. As 2011 came to an end, so did the best time of his life. The excitement of having overcome several of his fears regarding entering adult life was wearing off, and Randy started to hear the call of the void once again. On February 13th, Randy wakes up and goes to attend his classes at college just like any regular Monday. As he leaves algebra class and makes his way to his car in the parking lot, he gets a phone call from his mother. She tells him an acquaintance of his from high school, Tom, was driving to school that morning when he lost control of the vehicle and was killed in a car crash. This was Randy's reaction, in his own words. It forever left a depressing void in my heart. I barely spoke to the kid, but I knew him. Everyone knew him. Within a few minutes, I was just numb. I sat there in the parking lot in my green Nissan Altima and just was in complete shock. Not freaking out, just pale, numb. Miles away. I hardly knew the kid, but only being a grade ahead of him, it really hit me hard. My brother was a wreck since he was in the same grade as him, knowing him his whole life. I would have worked with him at McDonald's had I not quit after only a day. I remember Tom saw me in Flex, which was an end-of-the-day activity period, and said, "Why'd you quit?" It was my first job, and obviously McDonald's isn't a great start. But that conversation stuck with me. That may have been the last time I saw him. He was in a history class with me, but that might have been 11th grade. It's a blur. Tom's death was the first of many events that changed me into who I am today. Tom's death sucked the life out of me. I've kind of made it an annual tradition to drive past Tom's crash site every February 13th, and today I did. He wrecked on the final turn that leads to a highway, was coming from a back road. I'll never forget it, and never truly will move on from it. This is probably one of the focal points of his story, since there are many aspects to examine here. For one, after quite some time of being fascinated with dark things, this is the very first instance of being truly close to death, and a particularly unusual one at that. Tom was a year younger than him, driving himself to school, exactly like Randy did, when all of a sudden, he died. Part of why this was so impactful for Randy was precisely because he wasn't close to Tom, and because of this, his grief didn't express as intense sorrow, but a kind of numbness. Randy already struggled very strongly with the idea of growing old and becoming like his parents, so when he envisioned his future, the only thing he could see past his 20s was an untimely, abrupt passing, like Tom's. He expresses this in another passage of his diary. I knew in 2012 I'd be dead by 2018. When discussing this time period on video, he elaborated on how he reacted to Tom's passing.
From that point on, I was just fascinated by death. I was always like interested in like learning about the afterlife and what could happen and all this, but I wasn't like a dark kid at that time. I was still like, I was kooky, I was doing my own thing with my YouTube videos, and I wasn't miserable, I wasn't upset, I wasn't depressed. I was just like, you know, I just gotta get through this year, and then I'm gonna take my major classes in college, and everything's gonna be all honky-dory, and things are gonna be fun and awesome, and it'll lead to new, bigger, and better things and all this. And then once that happened, something just went in my head. It hit like so close to home. Like I'd never dealt with anyone who was, you know, a year younger than me dying, you know, and everyone deals with it in their own way, but I just couldn't get it off my mind after that, and I started over-analyzing the living hell out of it. And I had Tom on my Facebook at the time too, so, you know, I started seeing all the stuff that got posted around the Dallas community on Facebook, and I couldn't get away from it all, and I just kept getting sucked into it all. And I just wanted to know everything about it. I wanted to know what killed him. I wanted to know how fast he was going. I wanted to know if he died at the scene or at the hospital. I wanted to know everything. Was he cremated? Was he buried? And it just, one thing kept leading to another and to another and to another, but I just kept that all to myself. I didn't ask anybody this stuff. I didn't want to go like to that extreme of asking details like that, because that's not right. I just kept going into this dark place, and I liked it. I wasn't afraid of it. I liked it. I enjoyed it. It felt natural to me. But as the year went on, I sort of kind of dug myself out of the little hole that I dug, you know. I got back on track. Sure, my grades plummeted at the time, but I still managed to pass everything somehow.
Again, not a lot of content has been specifically dated to 2012, and it's difficult to tell when an archive video is from based on how Randy looks alone. However, he once again celebrated his channel's anniversary in June, which is tail-ended by a montage of the videos he had uploaded in the past year.
So now you gotta open your creaking door again, step on the duck again, and walk back again, and step on the duck again, and close your creaking door again. But oh, you forgot to take your contacts out.
Other than the horsehead related videos, his content seemed much better compared to the previous years, at least judging from what we can see in the montage. He was even the subject of yet another interview by a small YouTube channel. Obviously, these standards during that era weren't as high as they are now, but even still, if you showed people some of this stuff and told them that Randy was a mid-sized YouTuber from 2012, they wouldn't really doubt it, especially considering how many people in the early 2010s were basically angry video game nerd clones and developed sizable audiences doing it. There's a slightly noticeable increase in violent themes, but still nothing to be concerned about. Even with what had happened to Tom earlier that year, he not only managed to behave normally, but actually dedicated some energy to the videos he was uploading. An entry in his diary reflects this. By fall 2012, I was back to myself again and made two of my favorite YouTube videos, A Furby's Calling and Crazy Christmas Maniac. If ever there was a crossroads moment for Randy, it was 2012. Tom's passing was rough on him, but for the time being, he looked like he was heading in the right direction, focusing on his videos while going through college without relapsing into his Ember obsession. Things looked good, but odds are you already know how this story ends, so you know this grace period didn't last. In December 2012, much to Randy's chagrin, the year ended the same way it began, with the death of someone he knew. In his diary, he said that Tom's death sucked the life out of him, but the death of another friend of his, Matt, was what killed him. In his college's video production class, he and Matt were part of a little friend group, and though they didn't really do anything outside of work together on projects at school, Randy appreciated his company quite a bit, especially since after leaving high school, he had very few friends he was still in touch with with, let alone people willing to cooperate with him on video projects. Matt, along with her mutual friends, even started watching Randy's YouTube content, liked it, and shared it on his social media accounts, which made Randy very happy. As the year went by, they grew closer together, a sign that whatever social stability Randy had previously found in his life, he was on his way to get there once again. That is, until the holiday break. Within 2 weeks of the break having started, Matt was also involved in a car crash that led to his death. The accident took place just 1.5 miles away from the Wise supermarket that Randy was working at, and he caught wind of it while he was there, hearing some of the customers talk about some kid who died in a car crash. The only thing is, no one ever mentioned his name, and Randy had the custom of not speaking to his friends online, so for the entire holiday break, Randy didn't actually know that Matt had died. It was only 3 days after school had started back up that, during one of his script writing classes, the instructor took him aside before a 9 a.m. class and asked him if he'd ever heard about Matt. Initially, he was clueless and presumed nothing serious had happened, that Matt had just broken a bone or something like that. But, as the teacher informed him, something much worse had happened.
She talked to me for like a few minutes, and I'm just like, yeah, I had no idea. And she's like, yeah, I was on the news and all this, and that was it. That was the moment that everything changed, and I was never the same since. Literally, something just short-circuited in my head. Something completely broke, something shut down. It just completely f***ed me up.
While not exactly the straw that broke the camel's back, Matt's death set something in motion that Randy wasn't even aware of at the time. Interestingly enough, Randy says that he was always wary of the number 13, believing that it was, as common superstition says, an unlucky number. His skepticism regarding the number was all but confirmed when 2013 went on to be the worst year of his life, according to his own estimation. During the same year his grandfather died, the yard caved in and flooded his basement, which had many of Randy's old stuff in it. Soon after, he totaled his car, and just 10 days later, his brother Jeremy also totaled his car. Randy's parents let him drive their Jeep, and he also came very close to wrecking it in the snow and hitting a tree. Lastly, his iMac, graphics card, and hard drive all fried, which cost him $700 to fix and severely hindered his ability to make and post videos. One of his very last normal hobbies. The walls were closing in on Randy, and quickly at that. The result of this incessant sequence of catastrophic events made Randy severely depressed, leading him to not even want to get out of bed in the morning, let alone go to college or work at the Wise supermarket. The only thing he still felt remotely good about was making YouTube videos, but he was finding it increasingly difficult to get into the zany mind space he needed to be in order to make the kind of videos he'd been making for the past half a decade now. His channel and general online presence continued to be relatively normal, even doing some Let's Plays, which thankfully have been archived.
Finally got the full game to work on a Mac, the original Five Nights at Freddy's.
Also, at some point in 2013, he sent something to Markiplier that Mark actually opened.
It's a Slendy Man shot glass. I won't even bother taking it out. Now, here we go. Hi, Mark. I've been watching your videos ever since I came across your Slender Elementary video back in November, and I was hooked. I think it's great you use your audience for good, raising money for charity. Here's something to give you a chuckle. Take care from Randy Stair, Pioneers Productions. Bing! Thank you so much for the shot glass.
Regardless, whatever external positivity presented itself to him during this time, it didn't change how he felt overall. And that's when Ember came back into his life. Many people have made jokes about how Sonichu is actually a demonic entity that torments Chris Chan. But if there ever was a candidate for a mentally unstable person's healthy obsession actually being a demon, it's Ember. Right at the lowest point of his life, when he could hardly muster the energy to get up in the morning, he feels tempted and compelled to look up her song from the Danny Phantom show, Remember, and the full brunt of the obsession overtakes him like never before. Paradoxically, despite repeatedly acknowledging how bad he felt and how depressed he was, he occasionally describes it as if this was good. I don't want to work anymore. I don't want to deal with anyone anymore. The 2013 curse is a hell of a strong one. I never thought one bad year would linger 3 years later, but the thing is, I like it. I love it. I love the darkness, the sadness, the abyss of it all. Sinking into the depths of the dead, it's literally a drug. I won't fight it because it's where I belong. I love that place. I love it. He further explained how he felt in his goodbye video.
I played the song pretty much every single day of my life and just fell down a hole of deep, dark depression and despair and nothingness into an abyss of just darkness. I can't even explain it. And every day, it just got that little bit darker. From that point forward until the day I died, and I liked it. That was probably the scariest part for everybody else, was I liked it. I liked this dark place. It wasn't scary to me. It felt natural to me. It was home for me.
Along with Ember, another compulsion of his came back with a vengeance: cross-dressing.
The more I wore girl clothes, the more I felt like that was who I was. Like I felt like I was a girl, and I found out that I was. I was just a female soul trapped in a man's body my whole life. And I couldn't tell you guys that, because then that would lead to never-ending jokes, and you can't live your life like that. It's like, how do you live? And I wanted to get sex change operations and everything. I really honestly did, but I knew it wasn't smart to do, because it ruins your whole life if it's botched or if it goes wrong, and not everybody looks good after a sex change operation. And that's what I wanted to do, but I couldn't do it. And then I'm also like, well, yeah, but then that's not me, you know? I was put here in this body. I'm gonna have to live in this body until I die. That's how it was. I always felt like I was a girl. I just did my best to hide it over the years, but I am.
As much as it's definitely true that the fear of being mocked or not accepted by his family and friends prevented him from telling them about how he felt, another thing can be gleaned from his unwillingness to go down that route, and that's his determinism. Probably as an extension of his obsession with death, Randy often expressed that he believed negative emotions and states of mind were simply inevitable. Because of this, in his opinion, they shouldn't be avoided but embraced. Likewise, in his eyes, death should be embraced. I'm not sure what exactly this is called, but it's not rare for people who have an intense and unhealthy fear of something to start actively seeking it out. Because we can interpret what we fear as challenges, it's only natural to voluntarily expose ourselves to them. That's why people do things like parachuting out of planes and riding roller coasters. However, this impulse toward what we fear can get out of hand and become self-destructive. For people with death anxiety, which Randy seems to suffer from, doing things like visiting cemeteries and morgues may soothe their disorder, because doing so gives them a feeling of power over it, taking away the mystique and consequently the anxiety from death. From Randy's diary, it seems very much to be the case that this is what motivated his obsession. I can't get death off my mind. It's on my mind at least 14 out of the 18 hours of my night. Death. The most beautiful, gorgeous, luscious thing about life. I can't emphasize how much death fascinates me. It's almost like an attraction, a sexual attraction. So many times in late elementary or middle school, I'd pray for the planes I traveled on to crash. Plane crashes are virtually insta-death. It never happened. I didn't want to go back to school or go back to work. Once I realized how the world works, I would either daydream in class about YouTube videos, girls, or death. To this day, those are still my big three. It never gets boring. I have fantasies of killing girls and laying them on top of me and fusing into their bodies, absorbing their feminine traits and absorbing what little life is left inside of them. I'm a ghoul, a girly, feminine ghoul. I want girls' bodies. I want to become them, overshadow them, and eventually discard them for something better and more satisfying. The smooth skin, the curves, the stomach, exterior, the chest, the silky, moist, smooth arms and legs, the long hair on the head. This is how I'm meant to be. Virtually every 10 to 25 minutes, I think of something death-related. Maybe every 3 minutes. It's a lot. I just can't get the thoughts of my final night on Earth off my mind. Like, just to think, this will be my last time waking up from a dream, my last time saying goodnight to my parents, let alone seeing them, my last time posting on social media, my last time driving my Hyundai Sonata, brushing my teeth, doing my hair. It goes on and on. It's going to be very surreal just knowing all future contact to this world as my human self will be terminated. Mind you, these are just a few particularly relevant passages in which Randy expresses his compulsive rumination on how good he feels about death. In his goodbye video, he reveals that in one unspecified video he posted to his YouTube in late 2013, he makes his very first veiled hint at his intention to no longer be alive, saying that he didn't see himself uploading videos anymore by 2015. In January 2014, he released a video called Amnesia, which, at least insofar as the kind of themes it contains, is closer to the kind of darkness he espoused at the time. The plot of the video is basically that he gets hit in the head, loses his memory, and the toys he frequently employed as the co-stars of his videos decide to take advantage of his vulnerable state. However, without knowing about Randy's background, this video could easily be chalked up as just being in bad taste by a tone-deaf YouTuber looking for some attention. Strangely enough, in his diary, he describes that this video was somehow related to him realizing he wasn't gay, though he never elaborated on what this meant. As dark as that particular topic may be, it's clear that Randy is just playing it up for a funny video and isn't taking it too seriously. The real darkness comes at the very end, when, during its ending slate, we can see the shadow silhouette of what looks to be 5 embers. His secret obsession with the character finally began to bleed into facets of his regular life. While his watchers had no idea what they were looking at, this concept was dubbed Ember's Ghost Squad by Randy, or EGS for short. It's unknown how fleshed out the EGS idea was at this particular point, but I suppose it was enough that he felt confident putting it into his videos. Eventually, he said that he considered this video the first part of a 6-episode anthology project that was his life's magnum opus. But we'll get to that. The second video, of a total of just 4 videos he uploaded that entire year, was called Search for Remember, which Randy says was the ultimate cause of his demise. The story behind the video revolves around Remember, the song Ember sang in Danny Phantom. As Randy recounts, for a decade after the episode containing it aired, the only version available online was a very low quality video with a mono mix on the audio. In a terrible instance of serendipity, someone discovered that its singer had it up in perfect quality on her portfolio website and made the mistake of sending it to Randy, not knowing what the ultimate ripple effect of their actions would be. Randy took to his alternate YouTube account, Worthless Toaster, to upload it to YouTube for the very first time, where it now stands at over 5 million views. Randy saw this as a sign of destiny, and Ember took over his entire life. In the same month, he made and published The Search for Remember, a short film wherein he was about to take himself out due to the song never being released, only to discover it in full quality and find a new meaning to his life. In essence, this video was autobiographical. Adding fuel to the flame, the singer not only watched this video, but liked it and added Randy on Facebook. I'm not sure how he didn't experience any dissonance, considering he was now interacting directly with the woman who voiced Ember, which obviously meant Ember wasn't real and just a cartoon character. Then again, considering how delusional he already was at this point, there's no point in really trying to pick it apart. Next up in his anthology was a video called Extinction, in which he exacts revenge for what his characters did to him in the previous video, supposedly because he lost his job over the video that was taken of the incident. The inclusion of losing his job as a part of the story isn't accidental at all. During this time, he struggled intensely with finding and holding down a job, and he left his part-time job at the supermarket. In his diary, he says, "By mid-2014, I didn't want to work anymore. I constantly envisioned hurting customers. In September, I got a full-time stock job at the general hospital my mom worked at, but quit after the first day. It was a second shift job. I just didn't fit there. The facility is enormous. There's like 16 to 20 some floors, and the stock could be for any floor in any supply closet. I would have lost my mind by Christmas." During that job search from spring 2014 through September 2014 was when I legit started thinking about suicide. The anger and hatred for the world was boiling like crazy. I got around 5 calls for jobs, but I never answered my phone or responded to emails. I didn't want to work anywhere. As the videos for the EGS anthology came out, so did their respective soundtracks, all of which were original tracks Randy composed himself and released on Bandcamp. Soon after the midpoint of 2014 was crossed, another addition to the anthology was made, a video called Extinction, which was an upload in which he graphically murdered the whale plush and toy frog he used to make his videos with up until that point. Near the end, he discovers that they had recorded a video for him in which they apologize for being so obnoxious, at which point he breaks down in regret, only to be interrupted by none other than Ember, as a painfully low resolution cutout PNG that wasn't even from the original cartoon, but a drawing done by Randy, speaks to him and tells him that he did what he had to do and not to feel bad for his actions. While the comedic tone is retained in certain moments of the video, the more serious parts of it were dramatically outweighing them. Not only did the plot border on nonsensical, but they were rapidly crossing over into Randy's yet unexplained headcanon about Ember and the Ghost Squad. I can only wonder how the people who watched it at the time felt about it. While they probably couldn't deduce from this video that he was as troubled as he was, it was obvious from the increasingly dark themes that these videos were a cry for help. This video also marks the first official appearance of Ember in one of Randy's videos, and this is as red a flag as possible that his mental well-being was in freefall. In his goodbye video, Randy says that Extinction was one of his best performances ever, though he struggles to watch it since it shows a psychotic side of himself that even he is uncomfortable seeing. As he explained in his diary, the job at the hospital during this period was getting too much to handle, so he just quit. Unbeknownst to any of his audience at the time, during the filming of Extinction, he tore a tendon on his pinky finger. However, he couldn't get the surgery done immediately after and had to wait for 3 months before taking a medical leave. But since he quit in September, he got the surgery done in late October, quite literally on the night of Halloween. Coincidentally, he was scared of hospitals because of the hospital scenes in the original Halloween movie. While in recovery from the surgery, he recorded a video talking about what had happened.
This is what it looks like. This is my hand right now. This is the second phase of recovery. On Halloween through Monday, I had this big bandage on, which was on my social media. I posted a picture of it. I'm just like this in the picture, but this is what it looks like.
He didn't show it yet, but according to his diary, this is when he really hit rock bottom. Fortunately for him, though it wasn't much better, he got his job back at the store, so he started making some money again. Around the same time as the surgery, he started working on the next episode of the anthology, which would be titled Resurrection. The intro was noticeably more distorted than usual, and even has some cheesy, creepypasta edits of blood and other dark, edgy visuals onto the images that are regularly shown during the intro. It's been speculated that Randy suffered from some kind of stunted development, and it's very easy to see see why. However serious the issues he was going through were, it's as if he had no idea how to articulate them in a mature way, so he made these videos instead. Mind you, he considered these videos to be deeply disturbing and dark in and of themselves. Now, they're obviously grim given the context to commit a heinous crime, but if that weren't the case, they'd just be cringeworthy, and he seems unaware of that to some extent. In between the blood-splattered, poorly photoshopped PNGs and acting out these plots with plushes and toys, the contrast between the adult topics and the extremely infantile execution gives off the feeling that it was made by an edgy preteen, when in actuality, it was done by someone in their early 20s who held a job and attended college. Randy Stair was a DeviantArt cringelord. Resurrection is more of the same as the previous episodes, but this time, the whale and the frog are gone, and there's only Ember as Randy walks around his house and drives. Randy began experimenting with very rudimentary animations that consisted of moving Ember's eyes and eyebrows slightly to alter her expression. A few months later, he released the follow-up to Resurrection called Absolution, which, although it looks slightly cleaner, is about as tone-deaf and janky as the rest of his videos. It's in Absolution that he reveals that he made his version of Ember not through any conventional animation or drawing program like GIMP, but on the emblem editor on Call of Duty Black Ops 2. Likewise, he spends the majority of the video conversing with Ember, and the video concludes with him taking his own life after accepting he was never going to be able to bring the plushies he killed back to life.
I'll always be here for you, no matter what.
I'm ready.
Are you sure?
Everyone goes.
Are you sure?
Everyone goes someday.
Interestingly enough, in the lore of his anthology videos, he kills 3 toys: the whale, the frog, and the Furby, and then he takes himself out, in a very strange foreshadowing of what he eventually did. Afterward in the video, dozens of ghost girls like Ember come into frame, symbolizing Randy joining Ember's ghost squad after completing his rite of entry and initiation. The following episode breaks the pattern of strictly short film type episodes, as it mostly consists of an animated music video Randy did for a band called Send Requests, which oddly uses the 2013 PewDiePie font for its logo. The story goes that Randy and his brother had recorded a performance and some music videos for the band, and since he liked one of their songs, he decided to use it to make a demonstration of his newly acquired animation skills. The first half of the episode is called Curtain Call, and it's just a bunch of clips from the band's performance interspersed with Randy's animation. The other half is much closer to a conventional anthology entry, though this time around, it's mostly animation as opposed to the live action stuff he'd done up until this point. In the video, called Welcome to the Squad, Randy explains the up until now utterly unexplained cosmology of the EGS. Basically, Ember's Ghost Squad is like a ghost girl version of Mount Olympus from Greek mythology, and when you die, if they consider you worthy, there's a chance you might be recruited and become a ghost girl yourself. After Randy gets recruited after the end of Absolution, the Ghost Squad starts trying to recruit the frog. Weirdly enough, Randy has one of the ghost girls say it takes twice as long to resurrect and recruit gay people, and that's why they won't be bringing back the whale plush. This video took quite a while for production. As Randy put it, he sacrificed the entirety of 2015 to learn how to animate. It's also worth noting that Randy's work for Send Request was done in March of 2015, and in his diary, he details his falling out with them throughout the year. The vocalist met with me twice in October 2015 in a CVS parking lot to have me help him cheat on a college project. He wanted the music video footage to re-edit himself for a grade. I agreed without hesitation since I hadn't seen him since the day we filmed it. We filmed it in late March 2015, almost 7 months prior. Being on the night shift, I had an hour of sleep before we met around 5 p.m. He seemed happy to me. I could be wrong, but it seemed put on. It went by fast, maybe 3 minutes, and he was gone. I mean, I get it. Maybe he was just a little uncomfortable since we've only really talked through text messages. The second time I met him at the CVS was a few days later to retrieve my external hard drive with the footage on it. It was a totally different story. He talked my ear off with send request info, which thrilled me. It's what I wanted. Inside info. Little did he know I had both meetings recorded with my iPhone in my pocket. 100% start to finish. There's even some laughter from it used in the EGS intro right before Stuck in My Own Misery. Now you know one of the many secrets about that piece. As I was saying, the vocalist gave me some details about the band's future, saying they were going back to Ohio in a few weeks to record again. He was very open, which surprised me, even just rambling. But then came the talk that would be the downfall of our relationship, the music video discussion. I thought that I was an automatic lock for the new music video, but I was wrong. Me and my brother had even gotten sharp new lenses, which I told him would make the previous music video look like a joke. He seemed somewhat intrigued and said, "We want this video to be perfect," which, being the perfectionist that I am, led me to think I'm your guy. He hinted that he'd keep me in mind, but I thought for sure I'd be able to help in some form. The entire winter passes, nothing. I text him asking if they're working on anything interesting, says something along the lines of, nah man, just hanging around. About a month and a half passed, and the bassist tweeted about checking recording a successful music video off the list. This was when the lies started. In the end, I'm glad they went with the production company because I wouldn't have been able to make it look like that. Anyways, I brushed that disappointment off and just figured doing cartoons over video was the best option. I haven't seen Andrew since that late October day. I began to grow more and more enraged with him, whether it be ignoring my texts or giving short, puny replies to lengthy messages. I got vibes that he didn't give a about the endless hours I spent animating the music video or my animation in general. I mentioned to him possibly spending 8 months on an animated music video. Nothing. 15 months perfecting my animation skill. Nothing. I filmed their first ever music video. Zero credit. He goes on to explain that he went back and forth with the band over online messages, trying to get the instrumental for another song of theirs, and after months of not giving him a clear answer, they eventually said the band had agreed not to give out stems from their tracks. Randy's reaction to this was to unfriend them on every social media and write the vocalist a 3-page letter detailing his feelings and struggles and how Send Request music changed his life, unprompted. Of course, the vocalist was taken aback and tried to relate to Randy, but to no avail, since Randy's goal wasn't actually to connect with him or establish a relationship. He was just after the instrumental so he could do his EGS video. It's really eerie how Randy's entire relationship with several people was conditional on them indirectly fueling his EGS obsession, almost as if he dehumanized them to a certain extent, relegating their worth to what they could provide him for his autistic animations. It's also interesting because this is one of the few times we see Randy be anything but bleak and aloof regarding the outside world. It's in moments like these that it's visible how truly alien he is to people around him. He thinks that recording everyday conversations without other people's knowledge is a fine thing to do, and secretly using it in one of his videos is a funny secret and not kind of creepy. He also expects a band that's trying to commercialize their music to completely understand him taking 8 months to make a music video for them with the original character he created based on an all but forgotten Danny Phantom villain from well over a decade prior, despite his animation skills being not very good. He described their falling out as his dreams being crushed and that they made a grave mistake in wronging him, while also mentioning that he sent the vocalist yet another page-long message as a "Let's go." He couldn't be more out of touch with other human beings if he tried to. He concludes his rants by saying that since he wasn't given the stems for the song he wanted to, he planned to forever ruin it by associating it with the crime he began to plan around that time. He circumvented the band and went to the person responsible for producing the record and ultimately spent over $200 to get the mastered stems just so that he could use it in his animation. Mind you, he's working part-time on the night shift at a supermarket at this point, so $200 is a lot of money, yet he gleefully splurges it on something as inconsequential as that. It's likely that after his blowing up of the vocalist DMs, the band decided to look a little further into Randy's online presence, only to discover how unhinged he was based on the videos he'd been uploading on his YouTube channel, and they immediately privated the video Randy had recorded for them that was up on their channel. In 2015, Randy grew increasingly wary of having his online presence scrutinized by his family members or people who knew him in real life, leading him to change his name on everything he had online. However, this wasn't the only reason. In a document from much later, he reveals that during this period something happened, which Randy called Randygate, that signed the death sentence for the Pioneers Productions era. It started with one of his fans, who had written lewd fan fiction about him in late 2014. While Randy tried to act as if he appreciated it, he couldn't hold the act up for very long and eventually blocked him. This fan, whom we'll call Dave, started ranting on Twitter to other Pioneers Productions fans who took his side and attacked Randy online. Even though Randy eventually made peace with them, it further demotivated him to keep making the same kind of content he used to. As he slowly pivoted to EGS material, 2 new fans did get on board, Sammy and Haley. Being completely unaccustomed to having fans, Randy engaged with them directly, which was a grave mistake since this made them extremely devoted to his online presence, liking and sharing everything he did obsessively. In total, there were around 5 to 8 people in this online bubble of dedicated EGS followers. This began annoying Randy almost immediately, as he was unintentionally getting roped into their lives and exchanging DMs with them. This was set into hyperdrive once one of the fans started frequently threatening to do something drastic on their Twitter account, publicly tagging Randy to get his attention. Being the misanthropic loner he was, with the dark tendencies he was already struggling with, it was excruciatingly difficult for Randy to try and do the reasonable thing, which was talking this person down from what they had in mind to do, or telling the police. A particularly exhausting part part of this whole ordeal was that this fan of Randy's would often disappear for days, causing Randy to spend his entire workday refreshing Twitter constantly to see if they'd posted. Eventually, it became too much for him and he blocked her, earning him yet another wave of hate from his remaining followers. As a consequence of him ostracizing himself from the bubble, he stopped doing live streams and further distanced himself from YouTube. But eventually, this bubble of people had a very different perspective as they collectively interpreted Randy's newer, darker videos as veiled threats to their lives. In mid to late 2015, he made a new Twitter account called EGS Andrew, where he frequently posted cryptic updates about the general EGS phenomenon. Around the same time, he made a wiki page for EGS, and in it, we can find some additional headcanon Randy wrote. Founded in the 1980s, EGS is one of the most cherished squads in the afterlife. Short for Ember's Ghost Squad, Ember McLean founded the organization not long after perishing in a house fire. During recruiting, all souls are fair game. Although the squad's traits vary extremely, recruiters generally search for lost cause souls, typically people battling depression or have become outcasts in their daily environment. Lost causes who finally earn their chance to be who they truly are make the EGS one of the strongest squads in the afterlife. There are occasions where recruiters physically reach out to those amongst the living, offering a way out of their torment and misery. In these circumstances, recruiting is cleverly executed as to not make society aware of the spiritual forces overshadowing the earth. There are rare circumstances where the EGS will purposely plan a sudden recruitment for an individual whose traits perfectly fit into their system. The appearance of an EGS recruiter is masked by shadows on the face and skin. Only the eyes and clothing are visible, surrounded by darkness and their own unique hue. There are hundreds of recruiters in the EGS. Only the best of the best are promoted. When recruited by EGS, your features may vary based on your life's interests, mental scars, and emotional traits. Each recruit has the ability to fly, turn intangible, sing decently, travel to Earth, perform basic hypnosis, play the guitar, and travel to other dimensions. By practicing and performing spells, recruits can improve their skills and reach new levels in the squad. The book, So You're No Longer Living, The EGS Guide to the Afterlife, is distributed to new recruits. Randy also wrote lore for each of the EGS recruiters he created, but they're pointlessly long and detailed for no reason. Strangely enough, he specifies that regardless of whether someone was male or female during their life on Earth, upon joining the EGS, they become female souls. And he also makes a point to say that all of the members are at least 7 feet tall, including the frog toy from his videos, which he thoughtfully includes as one of the recruiters. Some of the characters were even 10 feet tall, and it's difficult to understand why this was a focal point for Randy. It's been speculated that he based these characters either on different aspects of himself or on the personalities of the people who were a part of his life, potentially the friends of his who tragically died a few years prior. However, it's very difficult to discern any meaningful information just by looking into Randy's entries on the wiki. He also made several Twitter accounts, one called EGS World as a main hub for all EGS related things, and a few others for each respective member of the squad. What's even more disturbing is that Randy actively managed and posted from all of these accounts, making them interact with one another as if they were real people. While he was initially pleased about leaving his job at the hospital and going back to working at the supermarket, and even happier that he got to work the night shift, his glee was rapidly deteriorating as the job wore him down. At first, it was alright, but it quickly became overwhelming with stress from management. The job isn't hard, it just drags. Non-order nights feel like an eternity. I've long exhausted my music library. The best part is there's no one to bother you. I've even had shifts where it was just me and the floor guy who leaves at 3 a.m. and me all night. It's peaceful, but man do I get bored. You level the store and fill holes or do backstock on non-order nights, it gets old fast. 2016 begins with the last entry to the anthology series, Abyss. The video is just a monologue by Randy, in which he does a little bit of an impression of Heath Ledger's Joker while trying to sound as menacing as possible, while the camera either zooms on his face or pans around his room, showing his My Little Pony memorabilia, the innumerable images of Ember he has plastered on the walls, along with posters from the movie Frozen and the Angry Video Game Nerd, the poster for which was actually signed by the nerd himself.
People see us as mentally ill. Introverts, weirdos, screwballs, creeps, psychopaths. I see us as standout gifted souls.
Again, it would be cringy if it wasn't a real sign of his psychological decay. As Randy had already explained in his diary, as early as 2014, his rage had been building up, and he was already planning to commit some kind of violent crime. But even he had no idea what it was, or even if he was actually going to do it, or just take himself out and leave it at that. It seems that by the end of 2015, he already had an idea of not just what to do, but when he would do it. One of his cryptic tweets signaled it would happen on May 7th, 2019, with no further clarification. While the first half of the year didn't have any significant updates, according to Randy's goodbye video, it was during this relatively quiet period that he was completely sucked into another obsession, Columbine. According to him, everyone saw the perpetrators of that crime as monsters when he saw them as the true victims, and in his words, grew to love them and see them as an inspiration. He was particularly enamored with one of the criminals' t-shirts, which said natural selection, obviously striking a nerve in Randy, who immediately associated it with his beliefs about tragedies, like them being inevitable and fated to happen. In order to further learn about what had happened, he made an account on a discussion forum dedicated to the shooting, and his profile is still up to this day. While most of his posts aren't noteworthy and just express an interest in learning more about it, a few give a little insight into whatever remained of the person Randy used to be before his obsession with Ember completely seized him. In a post, he expresses disbelief that the parents of the perpetrators didn't pick up on the signs, which can be chalked up to Randy projecting his own situation onto their stories. At this point, he wasn't trying very hard at all to be secretive about what he was up to. For example, he got himself 3 natural selection t-shirts, and still, no one picked up on it, leading him to resent them further. In a much more revealing post, he says the following: "The biggest question of all, though, is would any of the Harris family forgive Eric? A big question I've always wondered is, if the shooter's family saw their sons in the afterlife, would they forgive them?" However, since he no longer went to school, he began feeling discouraged from doing anything related to education, since his college campus was either too secure or had too few clusters of people for him to effectively target anyone. And ultimately, he began contemplating just taking himself out in his room and being done with it. That is, until he decided to target the supermarket he worked at. After all, he already hated most of the people he worked with. Also inspired by the perpetrators of Columbine, near the end of 2016, Randy decided to start documenting his thoughts in a diary, as well as compiling everything he'd ever made online and his journey to the final acts of his story, something he dubbed the tapes. On November 23rd, he began writing what would ultimately pan out to be his autobiographical manifesto and testament. He opens with the following words: "I have no regrets for what I may do or what I have done. I am who I am, and no human can take that away from me. I'm an EGS recruit. You're all worthless humans. One day, you'll all see things my way, especially when our ghost squad invades your pathetic, putrid planet, and you become our slaves for the rest of your lives. I will not stop. I will not change. I will not cower. I will fight for the squad and do what I've set out to do. I am Andrew Blaze." If there ever was a time in which someone could have intervened and stopped Randy from doing what he planned to do, that time was past when he began his diary. He spends a few paragraphs declaring his admiration for Eric Harris and begins to essentially rewrite the story of his life, adapting it to his current self, claiming he's always been this way and hated humanity since the beginning, which is clearly untrue. In an unintentionally pithy segment, immediately after he's done pontificating about how he hates the world, he begins expressing his distaste for his own identity, particularly his name. He explains that he's always wanted to change his name to Andrew since middle school when he learned about Hurricane Andrew, and explains the meanings he ascribed to the name. He believes this is the name he's fated to have as a ghost girl in the afterlife, which is ironic considering the name Andrew comes directly from Greek, and it means man. In another document released a while later, he mentions the incident that prompted him to want to change his name in the first place. "One time when my mom sat down and asked me if I was okay due to a post on my Facebook that my aunt saw, it was a post saying something like, 'I wish I could be somewhere else besides this world, and to just get away from everything. It'd make me happier.' I can't remember fully what I wrote, but that was the gist of it, and it really upset my mom. I never got confronted about anything in terms of depression since then. After that happened, I completely removed anyone who knew me personally off of my social media. They were holding me back. This was also around the time when I changed my name. I wasn't Randy Stair anymore. I was Andrew Blaze. I knew full well that no one would be able to find any social media if I used a different name. And later on, I realized that Andrew Blaze was, in fact, my spiritual name. At least I'm 85% certain. Might be Rachel/Rachel something, but Andrew Blaze clicked." Going back to his diary, after declaring his hatred for people who smoke weed, he reveals what he thinks he'll be up to after he becomes part of the EGS. "I can't stop envisioning myself in the Ghost Squad, being one of them, being happy. Recruiting humans after returning from the grave, manipulating and seducing humans with my feminine charm, and then brutally attacking them with a huge grin on my face. The power, the revenge, the Ghost Squad. I want it, and soon it will be a reality." While he had seldom broached this topic in other instances, he begins talking about his perspective on religion, saying Christianity is a fairy tale, but that there are gods and goddesses. However, he follows up with a more uncertain outlook, saying that life could be a series of other things, a simulation where only one person actually exists, a punishment, or how he prefers to see it, a mission. In his mind, he was sent from another dimension to Earth to learn some kind of lesson. He repeats the aforementioned May 7th date, but doubts he's even going to be able to resist his urges to do something something drastic for that long. While the EGS channel kept him going, it was getting harder for him as he became increasingly aware of the limitations he faced trying to make animated videos mostly on his own. But he had been able to hire the help of a voice actor or two, who won't be named and had no idea that Randy would do what he did. But as far as the animation itself, he was having a very hard time getting it all done in a timely manner, which is unsurprising considering how depressed he was at this stage. On the same day, he writes about how he began to hate the mere thought of eating, regularly going 20 hours with no food for the past year and a half. But soon after, his complaints about how miserable he was turned into claims that he loved the darkness that tormented him, and he proceeded to write threats to the people who worked with him at the supermarket, even calling them racial epithets despite them being the same race as him. It appears his resentment for them was an extension of his resentment for having to hold down a job to fulfill his parents' expectations of him, which he saw as a hindrance to his animation work on the EGS projects. He only writes again a couple of weeks later, announcing that he would be shooting a handgun the next day. He recorded it though, and the footage has been archived.
Don't be afraid of it.
I'm not afraid of it.
In the same passage, he says he wanted to go the same way Ember went, in a fire, but only if he's very sure beforehand that he will, indeed, be passing away, hence the need for a gun. He also mentions another character alongside Ember, Mackenzie, one of the other members of the EGS, who became Randy's de facto muse as Ember took on the role of a more distant goddess. He doesn't make another entry for a total of 3 weeks, and though he begins the next one with the typical topics, he eventually starts talking about his parents again. My parents don't seem to have a clue as to what goes on in my head. 90% of the time, I'm as pale as a lifeless corpse. In the end, if my mom says, "Why didn't I see the signs?" then she should just stab herself for being so stupid. I mean, honestly, I don't go anywhere unless I have to. I don't speak to anyone unless spoken to. I make 0 friends by choice. I dress from head to foot in black. Even my bra and leggings are black. Find those yet? What about my black panties? I always look like a ghoul sucked the joy and happiness out of my face. Hell, the blind followers on my social media see the dark stuff from my thoughts on the internet anyway, but little do they know, it's actually real. In the next entry, Randy talks about the stems from the official Remember song he got from the woman who sang it, and reveals that he inserted subliminal messages related to EGS throughout the entire track, and revels in the thought of people downloading it and sharing it with no idea that his voice is actually in it. Eventually, he gets more into detail about Mackenzie, essentially establishing her as his afterlife girlfriend, which is a bit odd since he was now in his mid-20s and she was forever 16 years old, as per the EGS lore. He even explicitly says the infamous "age is just a number" line. Before the year's end, Randy records the first entry to his tapes. In the audio track, titled "Trying to Make Sense of It All," he attempts to pinpoint when exactly the chain of events began that ultimately led to the downfall of his sanity over the course of an hour and a half. In it, he complains that he's cursed not to be popular, but is sure that EGS will skyrocket in popularity once he's gone. Around the halfway point, he says he began masturbating every day to the thought of having a woman's body before breaking down in tears, imagining his afterlife ghost girlfriend, Mackenzie, talking to him.
No matter where I go, when I'm driving in the car, just around people, or just sitting and thinking, she's right by my side. I know she is. I feel her. I feel her around me all the time, and telling me it's okay. You know, I'm here. I know you can't give away your life yet. You know, you still got things to do, but I'm here, and I'll wait for you.
In late January 2017, Randy finally managed to find himself an animator willing to work with him, though it's not yet clear what that work was going to be. A day later, he goes back to idealistically fantasizing about his entry, or as he puts it, return to the EGS. Words cannot describe how happy I'll be not to have to eat, breathe, blink, or poop ever again. I virtually eat nothing nowadays. I'm 132 pounds of skin and bone. My arms are literally as thin as the EGS drawings. I want to chop my penis off so bad. They're so disgusting. Why do guys like drawing those putrid things so much? I can't wait to have my penis and butthole taken away and have my pussy and breast back. 24 years without them. 24 years! I miss my white skin, leggings, and long hair. I miss not having to breathe. I miss not being able to feel physical pain. This body is a punishment. Most of all, I miss my cartoon-like form. Bodies in this dimension are tolerable, but they're nothing compared to that dimension. Somewhere, someone is laughing at all the things I'm saying, like, this is without a doubt the stupidest psychotic retard on Earth. Ha! Keep laughing, pal. You'll all see for yourselves when your time comes. And for some of you, I'll see you soon. I guess I'm that someone somewhere, and right now, I gotta concur with his self-description here. It's also interesting to note that it's not that he believes that Ember is a real, ethereal, three-dimensional being that exists in the afterlife, who happens to be depicted in a cartoon. He actually thinks the afterlife, or at least the EGS, are cartoons, and he will also become one. He continues to claim he hopes his death inspires some kind of worldwide EGS cult that will take many souls, but as he often does, right after he concludes that idea, he starts reiterating his rant about how he finds it hard to believe his mom hasn't noticed the signs he'd been deliberately putting up with his strange behavior. Reading this diary makes it increasingly clear how much Randy yearned for attention from his parents and how his identity was affected by it. It's like he couldn't actually believe that they just didn't notice. If the aforementioned age thing wasn't creepy enough, the next entry is as follows. Whenever I'm out and about, I focus all of my attention on girls. I analyze their appearance, their traits, how they tick and think. Gee, they'd make a nice addition to the squad. I would kill to be able to lure girls away and brainwash them into caring about nothing but EGS. Words cannot describe my love for girls. Girls are my life. Guys, on the other hand, are absolutely disgusting. On Earth, you're either born as a male or a female. There's no in between. Yes, you are born with a sexual preference, but you're still a male or a female. You can't be neutral. My soul is female, but my mortal body is male, which is what I had to be sent here as in order to realize how wrong it was. Over the course of the next few pages of his diary, we can glean that the animator and voice actress he's hired are working on a project that follows a previous one of Randy's. In the first volume of the EGS tapes, which was released in December 2016, there are 2 tracks called Conspiring a Massacre, and the project Randy had them on would be, well, the massacre itself. A few more pages after, Randy declares his hatred for the elderly and claims that the conventional path of life, getting with a girl, buying a house, and working a job you like, doesn't apply to him because his dream girl is Mackenzie and she is a ghost. Come February, and Randy's writings get a tad sparse, with him saying that he will definitely not be able to wait until 2019 to do something about his situation. Meanwhile, it seems 3 people were frequently posting about Randy on Twitter after he included something in his videos that referenced them in a threatening way. However, it's very difficult to figure out what exactly happened since we only really have Randy's writings here to go off of, and they're not exactly cohesive. Either way, these people on Twitter can be said to be the first and only people to put 2 and 2 together and realize Randy was actively fantasizing about doing something violent in real life. A few days later, Randy wrote about potentially suffering from body dysmorphic disorder and OCD as he compulsively took selfies and adjusted his hair, claiming that he never felt satisfied with how he looked. Around this time, his depression was stronger than ever due to the animator he hired having to quit due to the theme of the video Randy was pitching him. He mourns potentially never finishing that last EGS project and complains that he gets little to no engagement on his social media accounts, being upset that his tweets never even get to 10 likes. He specifies that it's just beyond his understanding how EGS, which he considers worthy of being a global hit phenomenon, isn't more popular than YouTube channels like Markiplier, PewDiePie, and Jacksepticeye, saying what they do isn't a real job. It seems criticizing the quality of what those guys do for a living made Randy become a little self-conscious because he follows that up by defensively explaining himself for the poor quality of the animations uploaded to his channel, concluding his rants with, "I feel like I get little to no respect for how much work goes into just one video. I'd watch it if the animation wasn't shitty. Do you wipe your ass with diamonds? Do butlers serve you dinner? Jump off a 2,000-foot cliff, and when you hit the earth, tell me how you would have lived if gravity was better." I'm all for free speech, but when it's a comment like that, you shouldn't even be allowed in front of a TV. At the beginning of March, Randy makes another entry declaring his deep-seated desire to reproduce Columbine, but with a twist. His intention is to victimize thousands, not just the average 3 to 12 that an incident like that manages to get. However, he fears that due to his bad luck, he'll get tackled by someone and won't be able to do any damage until the police arrive. Acknowledging that his chances of success in a crowded place are slim to none, he goes back to contemplating the supermarket he worked at as a target, and begins to specify which of the employees he intended to prioritize during his rampage. To further enhance the degree of cowardice, he decides he would strike during a break, when there'd be no chance an armed customer could do anything to stop him, and while the other employees would be too distracted by something else to even consider that Randy was up to no good. He expresses that the 2 worst things that could happen are if he either survives or gets overpowered by a customer, and even mentions being sickened by the thought of the headlines about the incident if his plan somehow failed. It's very clear that despite his delusions and depression being the driving forces behind everything here, a lot of it is also Randy craving attention and being so desperate to control how he's seen, even post-mortem. In a passage he wrote soon after, he said, "I've always desired to be famous, to make a name for myself and inspire others. Sometimes you gotta do evil deeds to be famous. It's fate, nothing more, nothing less. Granted, shooting 2 or 3 co-workers in a store and taking your own life isn't national newsworthy, but it gets your name out there." While meandering about how his plans for EGS were too grandiose given the very limited time he planned to be alive and working on it for, he begins once again fantasizing about how people will react to his final actions. "I hate the thought of aging. I'd rather die young and be forever young. I wonder if fangirls will obsess over me. That'd be great. If you're ever struggling to find yourself and can't see your future, then go for it. Who's going to stop you from completing your destiny? Maybe some of you will end up in the EGS with me. I'll welcome welcome you with open, girly arms. He immediately pivots to another hateful tirade against the band for not giving him the stems from their song, before he reveals that due to his demotivated state and his fear of potentially fumbling his plan, he's considering not targeting anyone anymore and just joining the squad by himself when September rolled around. He cites his drive to return to his pre-birth state of ghost girlhood as the primary reason for what he intends to do. When envisioning those who will mourn his passing, he says the following: "People will see it as a tragedy, but it'll set me free. Be happy for people who do what I'll do. They're free from this putrid world. Life isn't meant for everyone. Accept it. We're all born different. You're free to do whatever you want with your life. You're in control. If they want you on medication for depression or suicidal thoughts, don't let a drug tell you how you should feel. You're not you if you rely on drugs." This is also ironic since when he committed his crime, Randy self-medicated, but we'll get to that later. For the very first time in over 100 pages at this point, Randy contemplates going after his own family. First, he riles himself up, saying it's unfathomable they still haven't noticed how troubled their son is. Then, he says he's been debating doing something to his own family before doing what he plans to do, but displays an unusual amount of hesitance at the idea. Whereas he said he's wanted to do a plethora of things to an innumerable amount of people, his family, despite how much he despises his parents, are the first time he shows a sign of fear of the potential consequences, saying, "I've been debating for the longest time whether or not to take someone in the house before taking myself out. Here's the biggest reason why I keep holding off on that thought. If there are prices in the afterlife to pay for killing X amount of people, that is punishable by X amount of years. Imagine if one person costs you 100 years of torture or isolation. Yes, I am 100% positive the EGS exists, but there's no telling what could happen in general terms of killing people. I've waited 24.5 years to join the Ghost Squad. I can't pile on anymore. I don't know, there might not be any prices to pay for all I know, but better safe than sorry." It's as if his family-related issues are the only thing that supersedes his general anger and lack of empathy for other people. However, he cuts this topic short as his nihilistic thoughts flare up again, and he begins talking about how everything is meaningless, so much so that he's even willing to forego his concerns with becoming infamous before he crosses over to the dark side. He even questions his own designs for the EGS content, since, in his set of personal beliefs, whatever he's depicting through the EGS videos, he'll be able to experience firsthand if he just joins the squad already. Just a few paragraphs later, however, the EGS psychosis comes back stronger than ever as Randy writes about how the squad will descend upon Earth and either enslave or take everybody out before the beginning of the 23rd century. And human beings stand no chance because ghost girls are immune to atomic bombs. He immediately bookends this series of statements by claiming he's not insane, which I suppose means he was still self-aware to some degree about how outlandish his writings were. But I guess being self-aware was of little avail when it came to making him actually realize he was out of touch with reality, since he goes right back to EGS talk about how he came from another dimension and how Froggy, yes, the toy from his videos, is now a real member of EGS, meaning it wasn't just a sketch for him, it was a documentary. Despite his obsession with Ember not losing an iota of momentum, it was starting to become insufficient as a reason for him to stick around. Animation required more effort from him than he was comfortable putting in, and no other animator wanted any part of EGS, even if they were offered decent payment, all of which made Randy struggle a lot during this period. Besides visualizing his afterlife, one of the things that soothed his mental state was imagining a world in which he was famous through the works of EGS, and people crying and cheering him on in a theater while watching a documentary about him and his life's work. Despite having every intention to leave this world as soon as possible, he made it very clear that he hoped someone else would pick up the mantle for the EGS content after his passing. After attacking people who do self-harm, he explains his view of why human beings are on Earth in the first place. In his perspective, everyone is subject to a spiritual contract they signed prior to their arrival on the planet, and in order to leave, they have to fulfill it. He concludes this thought with what he sees as his purposes: producing videos, fighting his rebellious and assertive side, causing religious debates, and last but not least, realizing that he's spiritually a 16-year-old ghost girl. He adds that he comes from an army of ghost girls, and that Mackenzie is his eternal soulmate, revealing he believes she's been talking to him in his thoughts for the past half a year or so. Though he claims that he'd been almost completely detached from the material world at this point, he repeatedly stresses out about what his parents may or may not do with his belongings after his passing, upset at the idea of them trashing something that he considers valuable, especially his EGS-related memorabilia.
I imagine my mom will just throw them out, because it's what do you do? It's like, oh, well, we don't need these anymore, and they'll just go through all my possessions and throw shit out or sell it. I'm gonna have to leave a note saying, you know, sell my EGS stuff to people who would want it. You know, oh, these were the posters I had. Or sell my mouse pad. You know, this is what I animated with. You know, this is what I made all these videos with. Like, stuff like that. Memorabilia, people would like that. Even though EGS never really blew up like I envisioned it might after I'm dead, for all I know.
He directs some passages of this portion to his parents, though it's nothing of note this time around. At the end of March, Randy mentions how he enjoys listening to himself speak and his intention to document himself not only through the diary, but also through video. He'd recently recorded another audio entry to the tapes, but was wary that people would also like to see his face recorded. As the date of his demise approached, he felt more in tune with his ghost self, though what that means is quite odd. In his diary, he wrote, "As the last 12 months have passed, I constantly feel more and more feminine. The way I sit, stand, talk, etc. 95% of the time since like October 2016, I've pissed sitting down, maybe even further back around August 2016. Every 4 to 5 days, I shave my arms and legs with girl products, even with a Venus razor. I love smooth, silky skin. Been using moisturizer, lotion, cream too. It feels amazing. I must have jerked off at work 10 times in the last year, whether it be in the car, bathroom, or the back manager's office floor. No cameras in there. All in all, probably 15 times between 2010 and 2017. My life total is probably over 700. Soon after April began, someone unknowingly made the grave mistake of selling Randy a shotgun, which reignited his fantasies about targeting the supermarket. It's also around this time that he puts his idea of documenting himself on video into practice, and records what eventually became the first entry of the tapes.
I know the surrealness of all this is probably creeping in right now with you thinking, I'm watching him right now, and he's dead, you know? Today's April 4th, 2017, and I have just over 5 months to live. It's looking like September 7th is going to be the day, the night, rather, and here I am.
He mentions that the few online friends he played video games with, one of which being Make Me Bad 35, were some of the first people to pick up on the appearance of Ember in his videos.
And I started using her so much that people started to question my fascination with her, and they just didn't get it. You had people who I played with, like David and Damien, Make Me Bad 35. You know, David would always constantly bust me about her and saying, you know, she's like my waifu and all that, and I didn't care. It didn't bother me, really.
They couldn't have known the severity of Randy's obsession with the character, which is really unfortunate since, as Randy retells it, they were the ones consistently inviting him to play Xbox with them and truly cared about him as a person. In this same video, he recalls one instance in 11th grade of when a girl asked him out.
So this girl in midway through 11th grade asked me out. She just walked up to me in lunch and then just put down like a sticky note or a paper or something, like I guess a folded up paper, and she wrote on it, and, you know, like, I know we don't talk very much, or I can't remember exactly what she said. You know, I know we don't talk very much, but I've always liked you, and would you ever consider dating me? If not, it's okay, or something. But yeah, just throwing myself out there, you know. And I obviously never dated her, but I don't even know if I like said anything back after that. But, you know, she could have just asked me. But yeah, it's just, I'm like, no, because for one, I didn't like how she looked. Just was not my type of a girl at all. Obviously by now, you know what my type of girl is, and it's Mackenzie. So, but yeah, it never would have worked. And I think she ended up dating one of like the big rednecks in my grade. So yeah, it's a big what if.
It's a big what if indeed. It's hard to picture how Randy could have turned out if he had gotten affection from a girl in 11th grade just a couple of years before his sanity took a nosedive. He proceeded to write on his diary and once again broached the topic of his family, saying, "I seriously want to know what my parents' and brother's life will be like without me in it anymore. I mean, I'm always in my room on the computer most of the time, plus they're always at work 85% of the time when I get home, so I wonder if that will make things easier to digest." Probably not. Who am I kidding? The best advice I'd have is to just pretend that I moved out. All I ask is for you to remember me as the spirit that I am, a deceased white female ghost. I'll never doing what I did. It was fate, and there's nothing you can do to change that. You were a fool to trust me with that shotgun. You can dwell on the what ifs all you want, but guess what? I'll only be getting deader by the second. How does that make you feel? I'll never apologize for doing what I did. Sorry is just a word. Nothing more, nothing less. Does sorry erase the mistakes you make? No, it doesn't. How can 5 letters change how you feel towards someone? It's all in your mind. Honestly, once the funeral's over and you cremate my body, I wouldn't care if I never got to see you again. Dad especially. Mom, you were great, but you're still a brainwashed human. He punctuates this section by attacking his family for being Christians, positing that, unlike Ember, God doesn't speak directly to his followers, and because of that, he thinks none of it is real. On April 8th, when he finally gets his hands on the shotgun he'd recently purchased, he decides to name it Mackenzie, and mentions he'll be needing to buy a new notebook to continue his diary on, as the one he's currently finally writing in is close to completion. Next, he begins talking about the things he won't get to experience in person due to his planned departure from this world, such as the My Little Pony movie that was slated to come out October that year. It's very disturbing how Randy nonchalantly flips the switch from talking about things like how much it would suck if the Cowboys won the Super Bowl and how he plans to execute his final act. In the following entry, he complains about his dad again, saying, "I buy a shotgun, quite possibly the manliest thing I've ever bought in my life, and when my mom told him, 'A shotgun? What the hell does he need that for?' Just be thankful I'm not going to aim that barrel at your face. You can't tell me how to live my life forever. I can't wait to see the look on your face when you find me. You'll feel as sick as you've ever felt in your 55 years on Earth. You'll feel that sickening feeling of panic and probably fall to your knees. I hope you never recover from this. Poor daddy, always thinking I was going to grow up just like you. I wouldn't do that for all the money in the world. How does it feel knowing money can't keep a family together? How does it feel knowing you wasted a lot of money on giving me an education? What are you going to do now to keep the three of you remaining afloat? What's your plan? I got news for you. It's nowhere near your time. You're gonna suffer for at least a decade and a half over this, and I'll enjoy every nerve-wracking minute of it." It seems he's returned to fantasizing about targeting the store, though he doesn't seem confident he'll be able to return home and tie himself off before the cops get to him. Also, for the first time in the diary, he writes a threat to his brother, who had recently said guns are stupid, which Randy took great offense to. After changing his notebooks, he expresses his wish for another Columbine before breaking off into a tangent that is simultaneously misandrous and very racist. Girls are better than guys, just admit it. All you macho men out there who gotta look jacked, hairy, tough, and in charge, kiss my white. Guys are literally the most disgusting thing on Earth. If women were to overtake them as the power of Earth, things would be so much more tolerable. Whether you accept it or not, women crush men by 1.5 million years. I'm sexist, racist, prejudiced, and discriminate. That's one hell of a lethal combination. Let's talk about black people. Black people dress like complete homosexuals from another galaxy. Their hair is a disgrace to the skid on their underwear that is the human race. Their voices are worse than Justin Bieber, Myron Cope, Fred Figglehorn, still like him though, and Donald Trump combined. They almost all have that you attitude. They almost all do hard drugs. They all think they're tough. Their lingo is more dumb than life itself. Their pants sag below their Their dreadlocks are just begging to be lit up in flames. Their music is the worst thing to pass through the airwaves besides the emergency disaster tests. Saying black music is melodic is being extremely generous. Before the next entry to his diary, he records another video for his tapes, focused entirely on the shotgun he'd recently acquired. Though he felt a lot more emboldened about his plans now that he had something of this caliber, in his diary, he describes himself as becoming more cautious, afraid that his mom might suspect something's up if he begins acting moody or irritable. He also says that the date of his final act is now dependent solely on when the last EGS video gets fully animated, which could be anywhere from June to September. A couple of days later, he goes on a Unabomber tier rant about technology, deriding anything from cell phones to TV to drones. However, the firearm is one piece of technology he doesn't hate. On April 15th, he records himself shooting his Mossberg for the very first time, and though it is his first time, it's astonishing how bad he is at aiming it. I'm not one to talk, but people have made edits ratioing how many times he misses versus the amount of times he hits his target, and he's not a very good shot. In the recording, he's seen wearing his Natural Selection shirt while at the range, a fact that he celebrated to this day, taking joy in how nobody was able to pick up on it and ask him about it. To make matters even more disturbing, he immediately follows this passage with a declaration that he's about to go watch the new season of My Little Pony. As the days passed, Randy got more and more anxious about his plans, and he often had dreams, or nightmares, where the police were either seizing his shotgun or finding him after he was done. It's at this moment that Randy decides to leave whether he'll be targeting the supermarket or not up to a coin flip. Again, he's very attached to the idea of inevitability and chains of causality, so while it is absurd that someone would do this, it fits perfectly with what we've learned about Randy so far. He never mentions it in his diary, so I doubt that he's seen it, but the antagonist of No Country for Old Men does the very same thing for the same reason. On the 20th of April, he celebrates the anniversary of Columbine, just a few days before he practices shooting again. Having a weapon with him is becoming too tempting for him to resist, especially in his current mental state, and Randy finally settles on June as his last month on Earth. As for the video he'd been working on, he decided to only animate the first half and leave it at that, as animating the whole thing would take a lot longer. On the 24th, he gets over 200 shells and tapes it while doing his best attempt at sounding like a lunatic.
So I just got my f***ing shells in the mail, and look at that shit. But wait, there's more!
A lot of Randy's mannerisms are noticeably awkward. It's as if he learned how to express himself from watching cartoons and early YouTube videos, as opposed to interacting with other people in real life. A day later, he finally does the dreaded coin flip, on video nonetheless.
So here's the deal. Got a 1983 quarter right here. You believe in fate? Here's the fate test. I'm gonna flip this 3 times, or the best out of 3 rather. If it's heads, I'll do it here. If it's tails, supermarket. Here we go.
It was at this very moment that the course of 3 people's lives were radically altered. It was a close call, as Randy had gotten 2 heads and 2 tails after 4 coin tosses. As the final coin was tossed, it unfortunately landed on tails, having this decision taken for him by fate itself, at least how he saw it. On the same day, he records a grisly video titled Original Planned Route, consisting primarily of Randy's point of view as he silently paces the intended course he intended to go on the day of the attack. His next order of business was to buy yet another shotgun, just in the off chance the first one was to fail on him somehow. He decided to name the new shotgun Rachel after another EGS recruiter. And keep in mind, he also previously referred to himself as possibly being called Rachel in the afterlife. He also documented this on video. During the month of May, he records a total of 4 shooting range videos, but his aim never even slightly improves, probably due to how feeble and jittery Randy had become from chronically malnourishing himself and being sleep deprived. On May 8th and 9th, he records a couple of audio entries doing his usual spiel, the latter of which is dedicated to Mackenzie, and is, to put it bluntly, an hour and a half of teary-eyed Randy swooning about a fictional ghost girl and explaining how she changed his life. It's not until May 11th that we get another entry to Randy's tapes, which is called Plan A.
What's up? It's empty. She's empty.
Very little of this particular recording can be shown on YouTube due not only to the appearance of a real firearm, but also due to Randy explicitly discussing every detail of his plan to target the Wise supermarket. A couple of days after this taping, he writes this in his diary: "I hope that supermarket permanently closes after I'm through. To all of the staff who get days off for this operation, you're welcome. Live it up. And be on the lookout for the former employees' ghosts throughout your shifts. I hope the surveillance footage gets burned into the retinas of everyone in Tunkhannock and Northeast Pennsylvania. To my fans, I hope my voice gets permanently embedded in your thoughts. The longer you forget about me, the more active I'll be." This entry is followed by another love letter and song dedicated to Mackenzie, and it's at this point the written entries to his diary slow down. The reason is revealed on the 20th, when he expresses how dejected he'd become. In it, he says he doesn't want to eat anything anymore and has been living off of trail mix granola bars, pretzels, and the odd fast food item, maintaining his weight at a jaw-droppingly low 133 pounds, which is pretty underweight for a guy that's 6'3" to 6'4" like he was. Then, he mourns the fact that his boss, whom he hates, is planning to leave the night shift, which would effectively take away Randy's opportunity to target him as well during his rampage. It seems he also fell for the video game logic meme that if you shoot at propane tanks, they'll explode instantly, and began planning to steal his manager's key so he could get to them and blow them up. In the next entry, he briefly questions the existence of hell or any kind of retributive justice in the afterlife. Interestingly enough, he ties this with the claim that if he's wrong and God exists by some twist of fate, he would adapt to it, whatever that means. As his final days approached, he claimed he would record audio of it as it took place, though he himself acknowledges there'd be no way to upload it online unless it somehow got leaked post-mortem. Since this file has never surfaced, he either didn't record it or it's been safely stored away in police records. In one of his last mentions of it altogether, he says that the massacre video he'd been working on will remain unfinished, as he no longer had the motivation to work on it, nor the funds, since he spent all of his money on ammunition. On the 25th, he posted a video revising his plans after he figured out that shooting at propane tanks does nothing, so he intended to correct for it by loading a shopping cart with lighter fluid and shooting at it to see if it would result in an explosion. 3 days later, he writes about treating his mom to Olive Garden as one of his last good deeds for her. In the few remaining days of May, he recorded 2 videos of himself driving, during which he discussed his plans, the animations, and the spats he had with his family over jobs. The very long-winded and redundant nature of his tapes at this point is due to Randy enjoying hearing his own recordings while he worked. So while he was recording them so that people looking into him could have all the details, he was also doing it for his own consumption and enjoyment. In his diary, he says that he'll forever be 16 to 19 years old, spiritually speaking, right before expressing the first thing resembling doubt as to whether members of the EGS actually exist or not. As he puts it, he's not sure which of them are real and which of them are made up in his head, but this uncertainty doesn't ever make him question the overall truth of Ember. On the 1st of June, Randy recorded the goodbye tape I've been referencing throughout the entirety of this video, which was dedicated to explaining to his family why he did what he did and how they couldn't see it coming. Though we've already covered the majority of the relevant things he says in this video, he retraces the topic of his frequent shaving.
Since like 2016, I've been shaving my arms and legs and entire body every 3 days. You wonder what I'm doing in the shower for so damn long? I'm shaving my entire fucking body. Nobody ever questioned that, which I don't know why. I hid it for the longest time. I kept the girl razor in my freaking desk over there, and I just got tired of hiding it. I'm like, well, they're gonna have to eventually know anyway, so I just started leaving it on the counter, but nobody questioned it, which I couldn't believe. That shocked me.
Not groundbreaking, but it further adds to the notion that Randy was purposely not concealing every trace of his odd behavior, leaving out little leads in the hope that someone would at least ask about it, and yet, it never happened. It's hard to tell if he's just genuinely confused as to how it could be that no one noticed, or if he's upset that no one did. He even mentions an instance in which his obsession with becoming a ghost girl came to such a degree that he decided to cover himself in paint.
Just one thing I'll say is like that white stain on the floor, like that splotch you'll see on my carpet, that was an Ember thing. I wanted to make my skin as white as possible to look like her. I wanted it to be completely white, so I bought this body paint, which was like, I don't even know what it was. It was like latex. It becomes like glued to your skin and you gotta peel it off. And it got on the carpet, and then it got freaking in my body hair, which like almost never came out at the time. What little body hair I had at the time anyways, but that stuff never came off.
Later on in that footage, he mentions that he even revealed he'd been working on a high school shooting animation to his mom around the same time he got surgery, and still, nothing came of it. In the latter half of the recording, Randy reveals something that he hadn't even documented in his journey, but saw fit to relay in the recording. In the wake of his hard pivot to EGS content on YouTube, everyone either found it weird and left, or hung on in the hopes that Randy would eventually go back to making the kind of zany content he used to produce. Everyone except one girl.
I started talking with a girl online who was a fan of my videos, and I was able to connect with her because she was like crazy, like mentally crazy, but she was virtually on the edge of like literally like ending her life. She was suicidal and all this, and I was able to talk with her because she was able to connect with me and understood me and how I was feeling and all this stuff and my hatred for the world. We knew the world was bullshit. We knew our lives were full of like hell, and we just didn't want to be on this planet anymore. And then the EGS stuff that I made connected with her more than like anything that had in her life up to that point. That was like one of the only things that was keeping her alive. I just grew a connection with her, and I started talking to her about the shotgun I got. She was one of only 2 people I told about the shotgun. I could just talk to her about anything, which was nice because there was no one I could talk to about this stuff besides my own journal. So I started talking to her about all this stuff, and you know, I said like, oh, I've had the gun in my mouth a few times, but never pulled the trigger. That's just because I was practicing. But I told her that stuff. She just went into deep thoughts all the time with me, every day, just telling me dark stuff, and I understood it, and I was desensitized to it all. It's because that's how I lived. Knowing like no one seems to give a fucking shit about me, and knowing I have no future, and knowing I have nowhere else to go, and knowing that this is all I have, you know, and we got that. She understood that, and knowing that I felt like a soul trapped on the inside, begging to get out, you know, we connected well.
Unfortunately, it was too little, too late, and the one seemingly genuine connection he made with another human happened to be with someone who engaged with him in his EGS delusion, but we'll come back to her later. It was the beginning of June, Randy's last month on Earth, and at this point, there was nothing that could stop him from carrying out his plan. His next recording for the tapes was another driving video, which he began by ranting and raving about the voice actors he hired not delivering their vocal lines on time. For some odd reason, he dedicates pretty much the entirety of its runtime to explaining why the music industry is fake and why using things like backing tracks and auto-tune during live performances means you're not a real artist. After this somewhat random entry, he made another video titled Goodbye Earth, which was a spiritual sequel to the Parents video meant to give it a conclusion of sorts. The conclusion was about as grim as you can possibly imagine.
If you want to end your life, do what you feel's best. Doesn't matter who you hurt from it all, as long as it's what you want to do and it's what's going to make you happy. If it's going to make you free, do it. This is Andrew Blaze, signing off for the last time.
Despite this being his official sign-off, it wasn't exactly the last video he recorded. There were two more, one in which he gave a tour of his house, and another in the morning preceding his attack, taken in the supermarket in the same style as his original planned route, silently pacing through the premises. Besides the videos, he also spread his final words over a few documents he uploaded alongside the tapes, one of which was the diary, and it read, "This will be my last entry. I need to finish up everything and get it all uploaded by tomorrow afternoon. I'm so ready to die. 2 more full nights and that's it. I finally accepted that Wednesday night will be the end of me. Everything around me seems to have faded away. It's felt as if I'm the last soul alive on this planet for the last week. I see people, but they feel like an illusion. I've never felt so distant from society, and I love it. Nothing feels the same anymore. My perspectives on everything are different. I wish I started writing this journal back in 2013. So many things have changed. 62 more hours. That's the only thing standing in my way. I can almost feel Mackenzie holding me in her arms. You will never fully understand the desire to be who you truly are. I need my spiritual body back. I'd take my entire family if I was forced to. Rachel will be there. Maybe Froggy too. All of that pressure, stress, and tension will be lifted. I'll be looking down at those who I've inspired and look forward to seeing what you create in your lives. Don't ever forget about me. Promise me that. I'll haunt your dreams if you drift away from me. I won't lie, I wish my channels exploded with viewership in my 9 years. It was decent views, but I was always on the outside looking in compared to the popular channels. It took me until now to realize it just wasn't in my soul contract. If EGS blows up after I'm gone, then I accomplished something. I was just never meant to be famous while I was alive. I wanted fame. I wanted to be recognized on the street. I wanted to be in movies or have documentaries made about me or reenactments with actors. I always dreamed of getting somewhere, but it wasn't meant to happen. People can say all they want, "Andrew, you could have gotten help and saved your life." It doesn't matter. This was how my life was meant to end. It's how the script was written. I hope I brought a smile to your face at some point in your lives, whether it be on Pioneers Productions, gaming videos, Ember's Ghost Squad, in person, or even just through simple social media messages. I'll never forget those who changed my life. I can't thank you all enough. Maybe I'll see some of you soon. Remember, life can always be worse. Somewhere out there, there's always someone worse off than you. Hopefully, you'll be able to rediscover yourselves through simpler times. It's time for me to go. Thank you. I'll always remember you. Farewell. On the night of June 7th, Randy finished the video he'd been working on, titled Westboro High Massacre. It begins the usual way, with a live-action sketch and short film format, eventually transitioning into an EGS music video consisting mostly of stills. And then, around 28 minutes in, a sad grayscale montage of Randy's content comes into play. However, the highlight of the entire thing, if we can call it a highlight, is the animated part, if we can call it animation, wherein Randy and his ghost girl partner are doing their version of Columbine, but it's just Randy's rough sketch animatic of what he wanted the video to look like. If this wasn't deranged enough as it is, it's preceded by minutes of just drawn stills of Randy and his ghost partner yelling out the verbal abuse they received during their time at this fictional school. It's so ridiculous that it's unintentionally funny at times.
Andrew, do you even know what you want to do with your life?
Rachel, you're failing math again. Why don't you have a boyfriend, Rachel? Why don't you have a boyfriend, Rachel? Why don't you have a boyfriend, Rachel?
Shut the f*** up!
I bet you shove cucumbers down your I bet you shove cucumbers down your
You all with the wrong girls. Harris and Klebold are our heroes.
The video went up 15 minutes before midnight, and as soon as it was linked on his Twitter, it was followed by the Mediafire link to his tapes and all the documents he'd gathered thus far. It wasn't the only EGS World account either. He made sure to simultaneously post about what he was going to do on other EGS alts he'd made for the characters, though many of them are now suspended. Part of me wonders if this also wasn't a paradoxical attempt at having someone interfere with his plans, but regardless, it would have been too late. At this point, he was in the supermarket and had already blocked an emergency exit in the back of the store. He proceeded to block the other exits and lock the electronic doors in the front, while the other employees were clueless to the plan Randy was in the process of carrying out. He proceeded to arm himself with his shotguns and walk around the store, ultimately taking the lives of 3 people: Terry Sterling, 63, Brian Hayes, 47, and Victoria Brong, 25, the same age as Randy. All of them as co-workers. Besides Randy, there was only one person left after those 3 had passed. A girl by the name of Kristen Newell, who was listening to music while stalking in the back of the store and ended up not hearing the shots. In the CCTV footage, which hasn't been released to the public for understandable reasons, Randy walks up to the aisle she was working in, sees her, and stands there for 5 seconds before moving on without targeting her. Given his lack of mercy when it came to the other employees, it's unknown why Randy decided to leave her unscathed. He proceeded to continue shooting away at pretty much anything he could find find in the store, including the propane tanks, which still didn't explode. Meanwhile, Kristen unblocked one of the exits and made her way out. All of this took place from 12:57 to 1:01 a.m., and after he was done shooting, at least according to the timestamps on Twitter, he took to the alt account for Mackenzie, the character he was most affectionate for, to say, "Andrew Blaze was a great person to talk or be around. She always tried her best, even when she knew it wouldn't end the way she wanted. To all the loving, caring, beautiful people in the world, I hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive me. I've robbed you of an angel. But things happen for a reason, good or bad, and I'm so sorry that things have to end like this. I speak for all of us when I say that. I hope we're able to get you through the day. I always hate goodbyes, but it's more like, see you later. Thank you." His characters were at least in part reflections of his identity, and it seemed to use Mackenzie as a mouthpiece for whatever it was in him that begrudged the fate he believed himself to be cursed by. By the time the police answered Kristen's call and got to the store, Randy had already taken himself out, purposely, the same way Eric Harris did. In the autopsy, Randy is described as having his body completely shaved, wearing female clothes underneath his regular clothes, and having black makeup applied to his eyes, presumably to look more like a ghost girl. The autopsy also discovered that he had 372 nanograms of diphenhydramine per milliliter of blood. Diphenhydramine is commonly known as Benadryl, and the safe quantity to have in your system only goes up to about 102 nanograms per milliliter, meaning Randy had 3 times the safe quantity. It's not totally certain why Randy did this. Some say it's so that, where he did not have the guts to pull the trigger when his time came, he would get taken away by the overdose. However, toxic and lethal doses of Benadryl are only in the 5,000 to 8,000 range, so I'm not sure how true that is. It may be he just wanted to be in an altered state during his attack so he wouldn't hesitate. Benadryl is known to cause grim hallucinations, so I wonder if his intention was to derealize as much as possible so that he could carry his ordeal out. Ultimately, no one knows. He never even wrote about it. Much to Randy's chagrin, his attack didn't achieve the infamy he was aiming for, being mostly covered by local Pennsylvania news outlets and no national coverage. The Stair family offered their condolences to the families of those who fell victim to Randy. According to someone claiming to have been in contact with their relatives, his father blamed himself for getting him the job at the supermarket, his mom blamed herself for buying him the shotgun, and his younger brother was so affected he couldn't even speak about it whatsoever. One of the victims, Brian, was a Desert Storm veteran and the father of a 17-year-old girl, and his sister-in-law had to immediately open a GoFundMe page for the immediate expenses of the family. Another, Victoria, also had an infant son, but none of this had mattered to Randy. Years later, the survivor of the attack spoke about what had happened, and she was still just as clueless as to why she was spared. Eventually, news outlets caught wind that one of the last things Randy did before his attack was emailing the voice actress he was primarily working with, Laura, about what he was about to do. Unfortunately, she was asleep when she got it and only saw it in her inbox hours later, only to enter a state of shock and disbelief, as she always saw Randy as someone who was very polite and incapable of violence. Make Me Bad 35, the YouTuber with whom Randy had collaborated with a few times, made a thread talking about him, explaining that the two had become friends through Xbox Live sessions after their collabs, and that he got a long note from Randy immediately prior to the attack. Despite all of the catastrophe left in his wake, Randy didn't get his wish, and nobody was inspired by what he'd done and became a copycat. However, there are still a few loose ends, the first of which is a person who voice acted for the Rachel EGS character in one of the videos. On Twitter, she frequently interacted with Randy's EGS posts right up until the very end. On the 7th of June, when Randy posted "It's our time to rise," she replied with 2 hours to go, suggesting she wasn't just a fan of the EGS content who was unaware of how seriously Randy took it, but was actually in very deep and fully aware of his true intentions. From other Twitter posts, we can glean that she made fan art of the EGS and even went as far as designing one of the recruiters for Randy. However, when questioned by internet bystanders about her relation to Randy, she denied any knowledge of his plans. A Steam account under the same name suggested that this person shared Randy's interest in cross-dressing, but before any online investigation could be conducted, their online presence was wiped out, and to this day, their role in the attack is up for debate. The second one is someone by the name of Naze, who seems to have taken up the mantle of running the EGS since 2017, and is still actively updating his accounts with EGS-related art to this day. In the videos this person has uploaded to a Dailymotion account, they claim to disavow Randy's attack, but regardless, I hope this person is on a list of some sort and is being surveilled. Well, we do know that someone is keeping tabs on Naze's activity, but I don't think it'll do much good. Unfortunately, Naze is just one of many people who started idolizing Randy after what he did, so much so that a Discord server was created to serve as a hub for their activities. One of the very few pieces of evidence we have that this server existed, or still exists, is a message attacking Mr. Medicare for his coverage of Randy's case in one of his internet insanity videos. Outside of the Discord server, the brunt of their activities seemed to take place either on Twitter or on DeviantArt, where I had the misfortune of discovering that someone had drawn fart fetish fan art of one of the EGS recruiters. This is Randy's legacy, and if we're lucky, none of these people will ever do anything like what Randy did. What's the takeaway from all of this? After hours of examining this, after diary entries, videos, animations, what does it all come to? Randy's story reminded me of many different things. He was obsessed with becoming his original character based on a cartoon character he was obsessed with, and he had a convoluted narrative about how the cartoon would eventually bleed in and become one with the regular world. This is the exact same belief Chris Chan started holding in the late 2010s. Not just similar, the exact same. It's the dimensional merge all over again. A little known fact is that a couple of years ago, Chris Chan said Randy and him had interdimensional communications, and even channeled Randy, whatever that means.
She's in this body with me, so I'm gonna let her speak now. This is Randy Stair. Andrew Blaze. It's me. Randy Stair. I mean, you can tell from the way I'm talking here. So rad. I'm in the body of Chris Chan here. But yeah, everybody who's been dying within the past few months or so has definitely been ending up in their respective counterparts' bodies in the opposite dimension. The merge is happening, just as Chris Chan and Sancho and Magic Chan, everyone else have been saying. And
another interesting thing that's been pointed out is the fact that despite all of his disclaimers about how dark his content and thoughts were, they're not really that dark. Negative, sure, but mostly it's just corny teenage revenge fantasies that involve shooting. There's no deeper meaning to it, no cogent narrative, no amazing magnum opus at the end of it. We don't even find out Chuck E. Cheese's middle name. It's just childish delusion amplified by access to firearms. Both of these point to Randy being stuck in some kind of mental man-child limbo. His attention seeking also corroborates this. Part of me wonders, if Randy was able to become a lolcow, would he have done what he did? What if people found out about his goofy EGS content and began to make fun of it en masse? Many lolcows share the same desperate thirst for attention, even if negative. And though it's perfectly fine to make fun of them for it, there's an understandable reason why they're like that. Not getting any attention, even when you're acting out in bad ways, is one of the most depressing places you can be in. Attention keeps people alive. Even when someone's telling you you're stupid and your content is goofball garbage, at least they care enough to tell you. And that's better than nothing at all. We rarely look at it from this angle, but how many lolcows would have hurt themselves or others if the internet wasn't on their case 24/7? If left to their own devices alone in a room with nothing but mental illness, it's not completely shocking that Randy did what he did. This isn't all to say that other people around him were somehow at fault here for not paying enough attention. Randy is at fault. Unfortunately, the things he did get attention for weren't the things he considered relevant. No one really engaged with the EGS stuff seriously, which, though completely understandable given the context, is a massive misfortune that allowed Randy to succeed in wrapping himself up in this terrible fantasy world without anyone intervening. Not to be overly generous to people online, but it's not far-fetched to say that there is a benefit to the phenomenon. Maybe if Randy received a well-deserved dose of ridicule, his power fantasies never would have festered to the point they did. Maybe he would have had a reality check and realized how ridiculous he was being. But nobody ever said that. At the very least, people would be looking at his stuff closely enough to alert the police about it, and maybe something could have been done. But we'll never know, because once people heard about Randy, it was too late. I've been Turkey Tom. Thanks for watching, and until next time, leave me alone.